What do you get when you take a former manager plus report combo, who are now real life friends, one a management coach and sudden viral internet star who shoots from the hip, and the other a CX exec turned advisor who overthinks everything? This podcast. Welcome to the business of humans. I'm Joe, founder of CX Joe Advisory and the Overthinker. My partner in crime is Lynda. She's the founder of Leveled Up Leadership and the Internet Star. Join us as we talk about business, relationships, humanity, success, and also failure through the lens of friendship, heaps of radical transparency and honesty, and zero BS. Let's get started with today's episode.
Thanks, Joe. Hi, how are
Hi,
you?
I'm doing pretty great today. How about you?
I'm well, thanks. It's so, I know that they say that global warming's not a thing, but it's too warm where I live right now. It's unsettling. So,
Well,
you know,
I'm
it
dealing with the opposite issue, Lynda. Thank you. For anyone who's ever listening to this and is on the Northeast like I am, we are not having the same issue as you. And as it got to be Thanksgiving and into December, it was just absolutely icy and frosty every day here in the Northeast.
Yeah, so I live in a state, and for anybody who knows their state mottos, it's an old state motto, but it used to be the greatest snow on earth. And I'm looking around going, "Where's the snow?" It's odd. So
Yeah, we've had some snow already. And by the way, for anyone listening, so Linda's in Salt Lake City, Utah, and I'm in, say, northern New Jersey, kind of outside of New York City. So we're doing this podcast together because we figure we have pretty good reach across the country.
yeah,
That's pretty much the only reason we're doing this together.
the
Yeah,
only reason. So, Joe, I have to tell you, I'm really excited and really nervous, actually, about today's
you're
topic.
never
I'm
really
really
nervous.
nervous.
Stop it.
No, I'm really nervous about it because I mean, I'm going to share some vulnerable things today on the pod. But I think it's a really important topic, and I'm so glad that we're talking about it really early in the game, right? Because I think that this is something, when we're doing live podcasts at, do they do it at Lincoln Center? That's my target. I'd like to
You
be at
know,
Lincoln
if
Center.
they don't already, they'll start for us, I
Yeah.
assume.
So when we are doing a live show, I think that, there's going to be these moments that we forget, or these moments in our careers that, maybe have dulled over time.
Mm,
And so I'm really glad that we're talking about this. And you know that I have a lot of private clients that I talk to, and this
hmm.
topic comes up a lot in my private conversations. And it comes up a lot. I do kind of live broadcasts on the various social media
Yes, you
platforms.
do.
And this comes up in these topics as well. So I think that this is so important. And the topic today is, how much of yourself do you bring to work?
Hmm.
Um, which I think is like, people might be like, well, that's a stupid topic. Well, let me tell you
Hmm.
why it's not a stupid topic.
Hmm.
I would say that, and Joe, you are my business strategist, so you might have like some more guidance on this one.
Noted.
But it's so interesting how corporate buzzwords catch on.
Hmm.
It's like wildfire, right?
Yeah.
Like it's like wildfire.
Hmm.
One day we're going to talk about my loathing for the word socializing. We'll talk about it one day.
Wow.
Um,
Wow.
I, you
See, this the problem that we'll always have with your loathed words is I'll be like, A, I kind of agree. B, I think I said that like 17 times a day in each of my last three jobs. Damn it, I'm feeling attacked. I'm feeling
I'm
vulnerable.
sorry. I'm sorry. It's not
That's
about
the theme
targeting
of
you,
today,
Joe.
though, feeling vulnerable.
But there was this trend that started. And I remember, I heard it even a lot when we were at DH, but it started before this, and it was this idea of bring your whole self to work. Like, no, we value you as an individual, and we want you to bring your whole self to
Hmm.
work.
Hmm.
And if that isn't the biggest piece of corporate bullshit that I've ever heard, and I don't even think it started in corporations. I really think it started in the startup world, right? Like it was
Hmm.
some consultant said it in a meeting, and man, it became gospel, right? So what's kind of your like your overall kind of take on this? And then we can really kind of dive into the things.
Yes, yes, thank you. So my overall take on it is that an overcorrection of sorts occurred. So we think about overcorrections in like various aspects of life, the business world, the stock market for anyone interested in all that. I think of this similar as kind of an overcorrection. So I don't know
Hmm.
if you had moments like this also, Lynda, in your early career. When my career started, ironically, it was at a small startup, and it was a place that I spent 10 plus years. And the founder is someone who I'm so grateful to. Like a lot of
Hmm.
my perspective, learning, success, and career are thanks to him. And yet, I think that our small startup, we actually were like an example of being so far in the other direction that the bring your whole self to work was kind of like a reaction to environments like this.
Hmm.
So let me explain. His
Yeah.
guidance to me, I was one of his direct mentees, and anyone else who is kind of, right in his sphere of influence, his advice was to keep personal life and professional life wholly separate. He's like,
Hmm.
never go there with your reports. Never talk about your personal life. I don't want to like hear about it too much. He'd kind of flinch like when people said like, oh, a little hard to make that 8 p.m. meeting because I have some of my family be like, oh man, priorities. I don't want to hear about that. And I had this interesting life career experience, Lynda, where I was several years in working at that company. I'd kind of risen the ranks as one of the leaders in the company. And my wedding was coming up to my wife, Tina. And, I had a whole invite list and she did too. And I didn't invite anyone from work because it was so, right. It was like, an obvious sort of like enacting of his advice is like I don't talk about my personal, let alone invite people from work to my wedding. And then I got to be like 4 or 6 weeks before the wedding, and I felt this sense of rebellion. I'm like, I consider these people true friends. I really care about them, and I spend this was like old startup days. Like I spend 12,
Hmm.
14 hours a day with these people. Like I kind of want to invite a few of them. I did, and some of them came to the wedding. Um, but that was an example of earlier in my career where sometimes that one would get advice and there was a sense of like really hard separation. And I'll also tell you an anecdote from that same job where
Yeah.
I got feedback from a report. We got close enough that he was actually comfortable giving me feedback. And as a younger leader, it's like one of the first times in my career, not the last time, like when you would give me feedback and I loved it later in my career. But this guy, his name is Kevin, is still just kind of someone I admire and think of as a hero. But he just like sat me down and he was like, Joe, it's really good when you let us know that you're a human being and not a robot. Like
Yeah.
maybe
Yeah.
maybe I had let on some emotion or weakness and I was like scolding myself for it. He's like, no, please do more of that. We want
Yeah.
to know you're human and not a robot. So, I think when you think about extremes like this of like no bleeding, 0% bleeding, or a young leader like myself, and I own it,
Yeah.
it was my issue, but for whatever reason, I kind of, fashioned myself earlier in my career as this like stoic, almost robot, like seeking perfection kind of leader. Realized I had to bring the humanity to work in my management. So I won't like continue on this journey because I want to ping pong back to you. But that's the way that I see it, is that it was on such an extreme that some of what you're calling out, which I agree with you, went too far, and we'll both talk about that, was sort of an overcorrection. What do you
Yeah.
make of that?
Yeah. So, I think for me, this is the thing that I really wish that someone had sat down and talked to me about.
Hmm.
Of course, I knew everything, so it's hard to teach me anything, right? But there's so I don't think I ever told you I got fired from Nordstrom, right?
No, I don't think
So
you ever told me that.
yeah, I've been fired 3 times and laid off twice. And so for anybody who's listening, watching, consuming, you can still have a great, long, successful career, even with those kind of blips, right?
Most of the best superstars and leaders on planet Earth are in that club of having been fired or laid off at least once.
Yeah.
I am too. We'll get to another episode.
So I was fired from Nordstrom 3 days before Christmas. It was awesome.
That's
Um,
phenomenal. What great
yeah,
timing.
yeah, 3 days before
Holiday cheer.
Christmas. Good news though, there was a killer snowstorm that year, so I was able to, not have to go to work for that. So that worked out for me. But I was fired for a slew of things, right? I was 22 at the time, totally an idiot. And definitely this person who was like, I'm just going to be me, and you can't tell me I can't be me, and I'm going to be me. And I was essentially fired for being me, right? Um, I was difficult. I gave my opinions very freely, right? And I was very much a version of me that was pretty off-putting. I mean, like, listen, I deserved being fired in this role, right? I
And by the way,
absolutely
I'm just
deserved.
reveling in the fact that we started our careers, it sounds like, on opposite ends of the spectrum,
Yeah,
which is
yeah,
already delivering to our audience on our promise in the first intro episode that we're opposite humans in some ways,
yeah,
but we
yeah.
gravitate a little closer together as life goes on.
Absolutely, absolutely. So this is like my experience, right?
Hmm.
And I think about, had someone sat down with me truthfully, like if I had a good mentor or a good manager, sit down with me and say, "Hey, dummy, like we love that you are driven. We love that you're a human. We love that you have personality. We're not asking you to not be a person,
Hmm.
but maybe filter some of the things that you say. Maybe like think before you speak, right? Like
Hmm.
take a minute to do these things. Consider those around you and consider that not everybody is like you." And had somebody sat me down at this moment, before I was being fired, that would have been a game changer for me. And I think that that's where, when I talk to my clients and when I give advice, people are like, "Well, I have to be me. Like I have to be me." And so I really kind of want to zero in on, how can you still be you? Like how can you still be you at work and not feel disingenuous or not feel like you're hiding who you are?
Hmm.
I have referred to, and very erroneously, we are constantly learning and growing. I have in the past referred to this kind of behavior as code switching, which, as I have learned, is not the correct term for what I'm talking about. Now, is it a similar fashion? Yes, but code switching is very much a negative thing.
Hmm.
And I want to talk about like you can still be you at work, right? You can still be you. You can still be human, to your point. You can still have opinions, but what do you leave at the door? And then, of course,
Hmm.
like, what are the taboo things
Hmm.
you shouldn't be talking about at work, right?
Right.
And I think those have really evolved over time. I think that there's still three that are pretty like consistent. Like we don't talk about the golden three, right? But there's still kind of versions of that we can talk about, but we don't like cram things down people's throats. So
It's interesting. And
yeah.
like, with all sincerity, I am excited now to know what the golden three are. And again, I say this like no joking at all. I actually think that striking these balances is something that you do really excel with, and probably it's partially because you stay sharp and like coach a lot of people one on one on it. I really think that I'm an example of somebody who would do these sort of like sways back and forth, and then reached a point of, some discomfort and lack of confidence in where the exact line is.
Yep.
And especially because at that point I was in, director and VP kind of roles, my reaction to that was to like back away from the scene in some ways that I think probably did take away from my humanity, or from my effectiveness as a leader in small ways, if I'm kind of self-diagnosing. Um, but I want to, before the moment passes, my first little speech was about like where things started, and sort of the baseline to overcorrect from. I want to take the opportunity to plus one what you're saying, that later, um, especially in the startup world, there had been that sort of reactiveness and beating the drum of like, no, the old days are in the past. Now you're going to bring your whole self to work. And I think what both of us experienced managing at Daily Harvest, and I'm thinking also about the company I was where I was at before that, which is SeatGeek, amazing
Hmm.
company and product to this day. It was like these hyper growth years and mega startup mode.
Yep.
People loved working there. Everybody would kind of socialize on and off throughout the day. You'd stay in the office till 8, 9, 10 p.m. and it would switch from like the on tap, cold brew and kombucha, to like the craft beer on tap, and you're having the snacks and you're doing the whole startup thing. When I joined, I remember being told that at the prior year's company offsite,
Hmm.
someone had been terminated right after. And then when I joined and I had my first offsite, we kind of prepped the team a little bit, and then someone on another team, not mine, again just kind of acted way out of line, and it went down a similar road. And then it was, like, oh my God, we really have to talk to these folks. And I only mention it because I think it's a good case in point of, especially for folks younger in their career, they're
Yep.
joining a work environment, all they're hearing from the people team and kind of the overall, the company values, and from it's like, hey, bring your whole self. I know it's kind of a whole separate topic, but I think there's some overlap of if you get company events and alcohol involved. But
Yeah.
here you're like coming at it from a mindset of like, I'm going to bring my whole self. I'm going to have these free booze that I'm being handed. One thing leads to another. People are getting disciplined, getting terminated, and they might feel like a little bit of whiplash. Like, wow, I thought like the whole lead up to that moment was me just kind of bringing my whole self. And so
Yeah.
maybe part of bringing your whole self when you're younger in career is like, I'm gonna hang out with my work friends the way that I do with my friends, back at home, and that doesn't always cut it, right? And then also in that environment and in others, I started having experiences where, one team member or another would say something that in their minds was completely innocent, and they get really sharp feedback or disciplined or worse. Definitely want to make clear that I've tried to be a champion throughout my whole career of being super sensitive and empathetic. If a word doesn't sit right with other teammates, we need to be super mindful of that. But I also want to deliver the premise of the show to give you the leadership perspective that eventually one feels a little bit muted and
Yep.
muzzled. I'm like,
Yep.
shoot, I don't want to say the wrong thing or a joke that pops to mind and would have been a nice organic moment. I'm suppressing. I'm not telling that joke because I'm just worried that if I'm too spontaneous, I'm going to say something in the moment and it's really going to come back to bite me. So I struggle with that, Lynda.
Well, 100%. And I think that that is, again, where it comes back to like understanding how much to share, which I think comes through emotional intelligence, but a lot of it comes through self-awareness, which also one could argue is emotional intelligence. And so understanding like who you are, right, fundamentally. And to our listeners, to the people who are out there, it's about taking stock of like, if your company has company events that where alcohol is served, which in Utah, a little bit less of that. Other parts
Mm-hmm.
of the country, there's more of that. Understanding like how do you behave when you go out, right? And so many of these events, it's open bar, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how do you behave when it's an open bar? Right? Are you the person who like wakes up in the bushes in the next morning? Because if that's you, hey, you do you, right? Like we've all done things, but maybe don't allow yourself to get to that moment. And if you're someone who's like, well, I really don't know how to turn it off, then don't start, right? Because we have to understand that, and this is really the sad reality. And I talk a lot about this on some of my posts is like, although people from work are friendly and you may form real bonds with these people, not everyone at your office is serving your best interest. Not
Mm-hmm.
everyone, although friendly, is your friend and will take those secrets to the grave, right? They are not your ride or die. And I think it's so important for people to like have self-awareness and understand like this is who I am if I imbibe. Like this is who I am.
Yeah.
Okay. I know Linda at like 2 glasses of wine. I know Linda at 7 glasses of wine. 2 glasses of wine needs to be where I remain, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so it's about understanding that and remembering that what you say and do will be held against you. Like
Yeah.
it just will be. But to your point, as you become more senior in your career, you do start to get a sense of like, I'm muzzled, but I'm also kind of untouchable, right? Like I can get away because there's this power dynamic. And I've
Mm,
had leaders who didn't have the self-awareness that you're speaking of, right? They didn't care if they said something that offended
mhm.
people, right? And then they would just say, well, like, well, that's just who I am. I'm just blunt. I'm just
Mhm, mhm.
direct. And use these things with their title to kind of protect themselves. And again, I think that that's where this skew for people who are younger in their career, where it gets very confusing for them
Mm,
because they step in and they're told bring your whole self to work, right?
yeah.
And then they see these leaders. I'm going to do this. Leaders, those
Air
are air
quotes are
quotes for
happening,
people who
people.
aren't watching. Yeah. Uh, who then scapegoat,
Yeah.
right? So I do
That's a
think that that's
really, yeah,
challenging.
that is super challenging. And I think that's a good call out, that in some organizations, senior leaders could get away with things that others can't. I don't think either of us are saying that should be the case. It absolutely should not. And I think that at some companies and kind of the general momentum of the work world is against that. But I agree with you that both in the past and still to this day, there's still some X percentage of companies where that's the case. So that as people sort of rise the ranks, they have to be super careful. You don't
Yep.
always emulate the senior leader. Um, and what you're calling out is absolutely true of just, you have to be really, really careful, your alliances that you build. Um, be really selective, back to the theme of
Yep.
bringing your whole self, and also sort of venting, talking about work issues, and taking off the filter. I'm thinking
Yeah.
of one of my last work environments, and it was a tough moment for me as a leader when I first joined the organization and was getting some negative feedback on one of my team members when I'm first getting to know them. And so I got, guidance like, hey, please form an opinion on this person. I was like, of course, I'm going to get to know the whole team really well. Now, I had reached a point with this person where I was thinking, yeah, I could see where the improvement areas are, but I also see a lot of good there. And so maybe I could hunker down with this person for, a few months and see if we get on a better track. Then I started to receive pressure to part ways with that person sooner rather than later.
Yep.
And that
I think I
that's
remember this. I think
oh
you and I
I
had a conversation about this.
is probably another one which we'll tell our listeners that this is a, for better or for worse, a common enough kind of story for senior leaders joining a
Yeah.
department. This is another
Yeah.
one. And basically the reason I was getting that pressure, in my opinion, my diagnosis was because this team member had overshared, maybe brought too much of their whole selves, or overshared with some cross-functional friends. I'll use air
Mm-hmm.
quotes here this time for the
Mm-hmm.
friends, and it went up the chain. That cross-functional so-called friend shared with their manager, hey, this
Yep.
person, a little unprofessional, they're distracting me,
Mm-hmm.
it taking too much time. I mean, they're really going quite negative. And then once it went up the chain, it traveled up the chain and a senior leadership level back to my org. And now I'm getting pressure from the tippy top, like, hey, this
Yeah.
person's really, being distracting and so forth. And it was a really tough situation for me. And it doesn't matter what my experience was. It was a really tough experience for the person,
Yeah.
um, who actually had over trusted and overshared with another team member. I'm sure thinking that it was just a safe space and a safe relationship to share. So I don't
Mm-hmm.
think either of us are coming on and saying like, don't form really close relationships and friendships, or if you do and they're a peer and you've passed a point with that person where you're like, I'm just going to take the risk because they're close life
Yep.
friends. And then,
Yep.
and then in that case, you want to have the third glass of wine or overshare, go for it, because you've made that decision, you've established that relationship. But don't cross that barrier so easily, or think just because you've had a couple of great Zoom meetings with someone or found some common grounds that you're already at that threshold.
Or they've shown you empathy,
Mm,
right? I think that's the
right.
other thing where people are so they're pulling towards somebody who's like, oh, that's so awful, right?
Mm,
And here's the other thing, and I don't know that people recognize this enough at work, but we all know people pleasers. We
mm,
all know people who are going to tell you exactly what you want to hear just to placate you, right? Because they
mm,
don't want to have a conflict. And in this scenario, it could have been someone who's like, I really don't want to talk to this person any longer, but
mm,
I don't know how to say no, or I don't know how to
mm,
set a
mm,
boundary. And so I'm
mm,
just going to do this, but then I'm going to turn around and complain about it, right?
mm.
Instead of this person saying, hey, listen, I feel like this conversation's inappropriate, or I really don't want to get involved, right?
Yeah.
This is not something where I feel comfortable having this conversation. And so that was definitely a failure on the other person's shoulders, right? Like
Mm,
both
mm,
people are culpable in this story because the other person didn't have the boundaries or the wherewithal to be like, this makes me uncomfortable. And frankly speaking, you probably shouldn't talk about this at work.
mm,
Go get a business coach, right? Like go get an executive coach, go get somebody, go talk to your therapist. Like these are things that you shouldn't burden people at work with because it's a bad look for you. But instead of handling that conflict, they just rolled over And then we're like, this is really distracting, where this other person felt so safe and secure, right? So I'm assuming like this person not only felt frustrated that they landed themselves in the position that they landed themselves, all through their choices. We're not discounting their choices, but we're also like, they've probably felt actively betrayed. And
100%.
and those are like the pitfalls that you step into. And so again, why we're saying like be really cautious. So maybe we should talk about the golden three, the three that we
Yes,
should
please.
probably leave outside of work because they are hot topics and they will always be hot topics. And then maybe we can talk about like how people can think about this. How can they reframe? Because again, I think somebody listening thus far is going to go, well, you're still telling me not to be me at work. So I have some examples that I'm
Mhm.
hoping will help people kind of contextualize, and I would love your thoughts on those.
I love it. Like no BS. I was literally about to grab a pad and a pen, but I remember this is being recorded. So
Yes, it is
lucky
being
me and
recorded.
everyone. Please
So
preach.
the three, we are going to leave sex. We're not going to talk about sex at work. Now, I know anybody who works at Gwyneth Paltrow's company might disagree, or if you work in the sex industry, so you are excused from that conversation, okay? But in general, for the rest of us, we don't talk about sex, we don't talk about religion, and we don't talk about politics. So those are your golden three topics that if you start to lean into those, it is possible you're going to land yourself in warm water. Now, I
Hmm.
think
Hmm.
talking about sex is probably pretty obvious, but we have to remember there are laws in the United States about sexual harassment, which sadly still exists, but there are laws. And even if you are engaging in a conversation with someone and you are both actively consenting to talk about these topics, people overhear you. And people overhearing you, that can create a hostile work environment. Like neither Joe or I are attorneys, but we've taken enough sexual harassment trainings to know we just don't talk about it at work, right? And I think that
1,000%.
extends to like your breaks and your smoke breaks and even happy hours. If you work with the person and they're not your partner, maybe don't talk about it at work.
Yeah, and I don't know if for any, well, I should say that I'm sure for someone listening out there, this one would feel more in the gray area, and I say that just as an empathist or like empath rather. I'm sure someone feels that way. For me personally, I felt like this was the easy one of the three. With all empathy and respect to anyone who finds that one hard, I mean, talk about it with Lynda or both of us. But I'm going to say for my standpoint, that one feels really clear and obvious, and the other two feel more difficult. And so I
They
want to
are.
I want to ask you a follow-up question. And I
Yes.
don't I don't even have to pose as like a listener younger in career. I'll just be myself because I
Yes.
really like, again, with all sincerity, that the other two could be hard sometimes. So let's say with religion,
Hmm.
um, I'll give you an example. This is a reality that, I deal with. I happen to be Jewish. So
Yes.
you're chatting, you're just having like all the normal banter. Let's say it's December and somebody says to me like, "Oh, amazing. Have you put your tree up yet?" And in that moment, I'm thinking, well, I don't want to, I mean, it's not a heavy topic for me.
Right.
I have two kids. We love Christmas lights. We like drive around in Christmas light stores. I mean, what could be more fun? But in just answering honestly, I might say, for example, like, oh, well, I love like the lights and trees. I don't happen to put one up myself because I celebrate Hanukkah. And they're like, oh, okay. And then the next thing is said, and the next thing is said. It's a friendly conversation, but we're kind of talking about religion at work, aren't we? So is that going against best practice, or how do you suggest dealing with a moment like that?
No, so that's identity, right? So you're talking
Okay.
about your identity, right? So
Mm,
I'm talking about the debates between
I
like,
see.
oh, well, the Bible says this. And I was like, well, I don't subscribe to that, right?
Got
So
you. Okay.
it's when you're utilizing it as that level of discussion. So, and you're trying to engage with like ethical questions
Mm,
or um creating boundaries or those types of things.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
So it's different when it's something that it's part of your identity, right? Uh, and it's very different when you are trying to debate merit or you're
mm-hmm.
trying to discuss like ethics. So those are the types of conversations that we should leave out. And I think it's, having those conversations at work and saying like, oh, I'm Jewish. Joe and I, you and I had a conversation early in our career about our religious upbringings. And it wasn't a debate, it was factual. It was, oh, well, this is how I was raised. And this is actually like where I sit with this thing, right?
Hmm.
That's identity. But it's not talking about like, oh, well, we shouldn't do this because X, Y, and Z. Or, I mean, when the new Pope was decided, those are conversations that people are going to be like, oh, did you see that thing? He's from Chicago, right? Like that is religious based, but it's not
Mm.
utilizing religion as a topic or a form of discord in this situation. So it is a little murkier. Again, sex is very easy to be like, nope, we don't talk about that at work. But religion, because it's part of your identity, is going to be different, right? And
What
you'll
a
notice
great
when I
distinction though. Now it
thank you.
feels so clear. I feel like there might be one day some head of people or founder who's going to listen to this and go like, we let this guy run a department. He didn't know that distinction, but I really didn't. That's a great distinction to call out. I
Well,
love
thank you.
this.
And I think somebody's going to be like, well, sexuality is, you'll notice I said we don't talk about sex, not your sexuality, because
Hmm.
again, your sexuality can be an identity, right?
Hmm.
That's part of your identity. But
Hmm.
again, it's like, how far do we dive into those things? And then with politics, I think that there's going to be similar conversations of like, well, hey, Linda, like, what if I identify this way? That's okay. You can identify. You can talk about your, like, this is my political party that I affiliate with. That's not talking about your politics. And politics, I think, is the hottest topic out of all of them, especially lately. I mean, we could, we could go that way, but we
I'll
won't.
take your dealing with facts and statements. I think in different kind of factual measures, the country is as divided or more divided
Yes.
than ever. And
Yes.
probably by similar measures or surveys, the difference between folks on different ends of the political spectrum, and to your point, could be your closest colleague at work, your boss, or your report, that difference feels or even factually is, starker and bigger than
Yes.
ever. So yeah, very timely topic.
And I think that people are more emotionally invested in politics than the other two topics, honestly.
Mm.
I think people are far more invested. And it's so easy to get hot under the collar
Hmm.
when we talk about politics. And so that's the reason why it's almost just like, just drop it and walk away, because it's so easy to get hooked in these conversations, or it's so easy to
Yeah.
engage. And that's why it should really be left alone, right?
Hmm.
Like, it's one thing to say again, like, hey, everybody, we believe, at Daily Harvest, at the company I was at before this, uh, they gave time off to go vote, right? They were like, we believe it's your civic duty,
Hmm.
and we believe again, that's a different conversation. It's not talking the merits of politics. It's not talking the nuances, or it's just like, hey, we believe that you should vote and you should have the time and opportunity to perform your civic duty, right?
Hmm.
So, but again, politics, I think, is where it's so easily, and at least in the United States, and my experience is mostly in the United States. Although when I was in Argentina, politics came up a lot in those conversations too. I
Yeah.
think it's the whole
Hmm.
world feels this way.
Hmm. Yep.
But in general, it's just such a hot topic that it's best to leave it alone, because you never know how polarizing
Hmm.
the thing is that you're going to say,
Yeah,
right?
100%.
And how it will isolate somebody or create, especially as leaders. And I think this is probably the biggest takeaway for our managers and our leaders in the group, is like,
Hmm.
because we all create these stories in our heads, right? We all create, like, we all are the center of our own soap opera. Like, I am definitely the lead actress. Like, I am the talent in my soap opera. And
That's
so
why
I
we're doing a
create,
podcast.
right?
We're
So I
stars.
create these stories in my
Yeah.
brain of like, oh, this is what this person thinks, or this is what they think. And of course, because everything is centered around me, I think everything is there, right? And so if I have a leader who says something that doesn't align with me politically, I'm like, oh, is that a personal dig at me? Does that mean, right? Just leave politics alone.
Yeah, I think that's true. And a couple of thoughts come to mind. So first of all, I was smiling because I was thinking of my family and I moved to the town we live in between 1 and 2 years ago. So we're still fairly new here. We were going from closer to New York City, and again, we'll kind of leave politics, on the side, but
Yep.
everyone's pretty familiar with, like, you'd guess what the politics of New York City are, and then we're moving like a little bit more into the boonies, into the woods of New Jersey. I think I saw in the last election, my whole county of New Jersey was like either 50-50 or 51-49. So I'm just in one
Yeah.
of those little pockets of the country now. It's basically a coin toss, anyone you talk to. And when I first moved here, one of my kids' best friend's dad, so like basically one of the first dads I got to talk to and get some local advice. He's like, yeah, never talk about politics, man. He's like, kids' birthday parties, they go from like everything's all good, copacetic, to people like practically in blows because somebody said one thing about politics. I was like, wow, that's really intense. So, again, we could all agree that's like a little bit sad, and we could, maybe somebody listening is like, I would never do that in my personal life or at a kid's. I'm always going to speak my mind. And that's a separate probably episode of the
Yep.
podcast. But it was interesting because I got similar advice, in life, and this is what you're saying to do in the workplace. And the workplace is really like, you got to do it. I agree with Lynda. You got to do it. And it also brought to mind this point that I've alluded to of sometimes you have to sort of leave an opportunity on the table at work. And what I mean by that is you think of like, oh my God, this totally reminds me of a headline I saw. My thoughts are about that. And maybe leave that just on the table on the edit room floor.
Yep.
Similarly with a punchy joke. So this is actually, so much as I was very, honest that sometimes I'd struggle with this exact balance. But I would give advice to people earlier in their career that this is one to actually emulate your leader. Hopefully emulate your leader, or like what I would do is I played it too cautious. So maybe somebody thought I was like very unfunny, and I largely am. But you do sometimes like that's a better take that small loss. I left that
Yes.
little quip or that opportunity to be the funny person in the room on the table. It's much better than getting fired or getting reprimanded, right?
Yeah.
And that's the
Yeah.
reality. And again, I agree with you, Linda. Politics is another one. Just gotta leave it on the side.
Yeah. Amazing. So let's talk a little bit for the people. Like, we've talked about the things that you shouldn't do, but I think we really need to talk about the how. Like, how do
Mm,
we get there, right? How do I do this? How do I, because again, so often in the conversations I have with my clients, it's, and I'm sure you've had these conversations with direct reports as well, where it's like, but how do I be me? Like, so I have to not be me. I have to be this fake version of
right,
me. I
right,
have to
right.
do this
No,
thing.
no.
Uh, and so the guidance I give, and I would love your take on this, Joe, the guidance I give is like, you just need to find a percentage of yourself that you're bringing to work, right?
Interesting.
I have found the sweet spot for me is about 90%. There's 10% that I leave at home. There is 10% you don't need to see. You do not need to see all the mean things that I can say or my stupid jokes. I was telling, and I'm going to share a stupid joke with everybody now. Like I was telling Joe, the reason I wore this shirt, for those of you who are just listening and not watching, it's neon yellow. And I wear it specifically so I can say yellow because I think that's hilarious. I
Yes, and
think it's
and I
funny every
told
time.
yes, and I told you when our Zoom started before we hit record that it was ironic for someone who claims to be a pessimist because it's a really nice, bright, cheerful, optimistic color, and I'm going to keep
Yes.
needling you and accusing you of not being as much of a pessimist as you say. But I really like your color selection today. It brightened my spirits.
It's fine. We can bring it back to the self-awareness piece from earlier. But anyway, so it's about that. And when people are saying like, well, how do I do that? What do I figure? I don't know how to do this. I only can be me. My challenge point for that would be, okay, but are you 100% you 100% of the time?
Hmm.
How do you talk to babies? Because you're not bringing the person who talks to babies to work because you're not talking to humans like, oh, are you going to do this? Your Jews are so chubby. You're not doing that, right? Or people who
Thank
talk to
you for
dogs
that.
that way. Oh, you're welcome. Chubby cheeks. But you don't do that. Or if your grandparents are still alive, like you go present a very different version of you when you go to your parents' house or your grandparents' house. Or when you're having conversation, like my conversations with well, I was going to say my conversations with my teams or my teens, I have two teenagers,
Hmm.
are different than at work. But no, I feel like I probably manage my children the same way I manage my direct reports. But what's your take on that, Joe?
There's so much to say, so much to say. Um, Side note that one of the reasons I was smiling while you were talking, and I think again earmarking a future episode, when you were talking about the way that you speak both to babies and pets, I was recalling your posts on social that definitely, achieved like really high engagement. And there's at least one that is titled "Talking to Your Manager Like Your Pet." And I'm trying to remember if there are other ones about like talking to your manager like they're a child or a baby. There probably are.
There is.
Definitely the pet one.
There is.
And as somebody who used to be Linda's manager, I feel like we should cover maybe on a different episode. But I just want to spend the whole episode talking my mixed emotions, human feelings, seeing that post go up. And I'm like, go Linda and heart, and like, oh my God, 30,000 likes. Wait a second. That's about me.
You actually did text me after that. You're like,
I,
so I
so is this
saw this
about me?
post
Yeah,
and it felt really like I
right.
felt a little personal about
Speaking of percentages, like what
it.
percentage is that post about me? I'm sure you handled me very well as you always do in that moment. All right, back to the main topic at hand. Um, no, I think the percentage is really interesting. I would plus one that, and I'll complement that by saying I think the way that I've talked this through with people, or what I've tried to lead by example with like the last bunch of years in my career, is bring your whole self from the standpoint of who you are, your sort of underlying characteristics, your identity. So I'll give you an example. When I was earlier in my career and I was less secure, I would hide some of that empathetic nature and I'd hide some of my kindness. That might
Mhm,
sound funny to people listening, though for others, they'll probably know exactly what I'm saying. You actually get, tired, and especially in the work world, of just always being the nice person in the room. And
mhm.
sometimes after a meeting, it's like, oh my God, those were great insights by these three people. Joe, you're so nice. You're the nice. It's like you want to rebel against that. Um, and actually, I give the whole experience in the crew at Daily Harvest a lot of credit for. By the time I graduated from my 4 years at Daily Harvest as a leader, I was like, you know what? I'm never going to feel self conscious about that again.
Yep.
I think that if I am confidently empathetic and kind, and that is part of my identity, one, I think and I hope that could actually be a strength for me in my career. And two, if it's
Mhm.
not, I'm willing to live with it, right?
Yep.
That's who I am, and I'm corny, and I try to be empathetic, and I love people spreading kindness to each other, and that's going to be that. So if I'm the nice
Yeah.
dumb guy in the room, so be it. So I think that's an example of one where I try to bring closer to my whole self of sort of like these underlying characteristics are making me who I am. Another one, and in case that one sounded too that's like in an interview, like what is one of your weaknesses? I'm too kind. I care too much. But
So
no,
nice.
so another one that's like a little more embarrassing, or people will get, is like working in these startups. Everybody talks so fast. It's like amazing. And I remember like being in leadership meetings earlier in my career. I'm like, I have to try to talk faster and faster and use bigger and bigger words, and like, 180 words. And I just like had to jump off that treadmill, and I had to lean into
Yeah.
the fact like I don't talk that fast. My brain doesn't work that fast. I do better with, speaking a little more slowly, taking some time to formulate my thoughts. And that's another one where it's like I actually was proud of myself that I adopted my own persona, my own speaking style, my own speed. This is who I am.
Yep.
The strengths and the weaknesses, the beautiful parts and the ugly parts, and so forth. So I think that's kind of the example I try to set with people to emulate. Now, if you think about it, you're like, all right, man, I get it. But like all of that is so different than not engaging in these topics that are just better left to the side. So that's where I have to make those small compromises. I'm not going to tell that interesting story. I'm going to pull up on the
Yep.
personal side. I'm not going to touch those topics, but in who I am and how I engage with people, listen to them actively and interact with them, I'm going to be my whole self in those ways.
Amazing. Amazing.
The only other topic that is just so top of mind and people might find interesting related to this is you bring your whole self to work, and then a related topic of whether your work team or the broader work community is your family or not. And this is one I'll speak on for a minute and then get your 2 cents. And
Yes.
again, this is one where I would say at the point of overlap in our career when we co-led the team at Daily Harvest together, again, it's probably one where you were like a little bit more evolved maybe than I was on this point, because I would say that's around the time in my career that I saw the danger of leaning too much into that kind of terminology and positioning. So I had had a career up to that point, and to some extent since then, I just sort of had a more evolved perspective. But where I've been very lucky that I have been on several teams where those types of feelings existed. We really had deep respect and affection and loyalty towards each other. We had a blast working together. There's several people from my first startup of 10 years that I'm in touch with regularly. I even, travel as families with one or more of them. So I totally get that aspect. And almost in a way, like that's what the problem was. I totally see that side and I felt it so deeply. And then with Daily Harvest as an example, we had this really special group of humans, I would
Hmm.
say. We were doing great work together. It was just a great group. And then we went through a lot of ups and some downs together, and that brings humans together more closely as well. So that was an example where, at some point in time, there was commonly that sort of terminology or feeling of like, hey, this is my family. And
Yep.
it either complemented family people had, or I remember, and you probably can remember one or two people who were articulate, like, I don't even really have that, like a family I feel this positively and closely to in my personal world.
Yep.
So now this is my family. I probably knew that that was dangerous in some ways, but I would say also as a leader, I kind of leaned into it. It's like an easy and almost selfish thing to do as a leader. Just like, this is great. Like we're all just like rowing in the same direction, right? What happens in a work setting when you think that this place or this group of people are your family, and then some of that family gets laid off 6 months later because of either macro factors in the economy or something changed in the business? Hey, senior leader, time to lay off 25% of the team.
Yeah.
And now you're looking ahead to the fact, and the reactions definitely follow suit of like, are we like prying family members apart? I mean, it's just horrible. But therein is why I think that there's a fine line there. But there has to be, when you think about your family, and especially if you think about positive family bonds and relationships in your life, it's going to take something almost unimaginable for you to just sort of part ways with that person, or think like
Yep.
you're laid off, or like I choose. That's the point, right? That's why it's a family, but it's also the point of why, even as the most feeling leader in the world and wanting to create the closest communities on my team as possible, by the time I got to my last couple of leadership stops, I actually would have gently sort of guided away from terminology like that, because I've seen the risk and I've seen the other side of that. And I think that you could have really close
Yeah.
relationships and feel deeply about your team, your company. You could be loyal. You could get so much out of the experience. But I think we have to be careful thinking about our work team as our family. What do you think?
I completely agree. And I think that there's like the tongue-in-cheek use of family, right? Like, hey fam,
Right.
right? Like where it's something where you're using the slang, but for us to be like, oh, we feel like a family. To your point, you can go, depending on how close your family is and your overall personality, you can go like yell and scream at your family. And at the
Mm-hmm.
end of the day,
Right.
like you're not kicked out. You're not voted off
You're
the
stuck with
island.
me, right?
Like,
There's that
yeah,
feeling. Yeah.
you can't do that at work. If you go and yell and scream at a colleague, I mean, if you report to me, you're out. Like,
Yeah. They're not stuck with you.
yeah, I don't care if you're having a bad day, like you're
Mm-hmm.
out, you're done. Like we don't
Yeah.
behave this way at work, right? So I agree with you. I think it's getting away from this, and it sits in, and we can one day talk about like toxic positivity, but it does kind of force its way into this idea of toxic positivity of like, we're a family. Yeah, but families don't lay you off. Families
Mm-hmm.
don't like you know, truthfully like lay you off, and then like when you post on LinkedIn, they're like, oh, they're so lucky to have you. You know what? But you're the one who let me go. Like, how lucky are they? Right? Like,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
so I do think it's really important to, although we feel close and we spend more time sometimes with our colleagues than we do with our family, it's really important for us to understand like arm's length. We have to keep people at an arm's length. And again, that's back to the whole conversation that we're having of like, how much do you bring yourself to work, right? And there is this arm's length, and there's this self protection that you have to build in that arm's length,
Mm-hmm.
understanding that at the end of the day, you're a number on a spreadsheet, which is the harshest reality ever. You are a number on a spreadsheet. And when it comes time for layoffs, that is all you are. It is not this warm, fuzzy feeling. It then becomes very clinical and systematic. And so I think to your point, like it is terminology that really needs to be retired. Let's
Mm-hmm.
retire that phrase, right?
Let's do
Because
it.
it's harmful.
We've reached a decision. We've
Yes.
reached a decision on the podcast.
Should
I
we
was
should
also
we
going to say
retire a
on
phrase
that.
every time?
Yeah, let's do that. That could be our thing. Oh my God, that's back to what you wanted to do. You were just so, y'all, Lynda will always guide and manage you back to where she wanted it to
Pastor.
go. Yeah, yeah, totally. I'm the puppet on the
Well, so
strings.
I had pitched this initially to Joe, and he's like, I don't know. And then I mentioned it at the beginning of the podcast. We can watch the puppets, like we can watch me just how I did it. But I think that if we're going to retire a phrase from work, Joe, is that your vote? Is that your vote is to retire
I mean,
family?
you tricked me into agreeing with you and doing the exercise you wanted to do. So of course I agree.
I'm
Absolute
so
putty in your
sorry.
hands, Lynda.
And then I would say the phrase I would like to retire is socialize.
Oh my God, that's a
I
tougher one.
I can't stand that one. I cannot stand it
I know, but
because
now I'm going to be on an advising call later today, and I'm going to be saying socialize for the fourth time, and it's just going to like trip me up. I'm not going to be able to speak. You know, Lynda in my brain, like stop it. It's been
I
retired.
know. Truth be told, though, my husband does call me a ruiner. So, I mean, I feel like that really falls in line with like who I am
Yeah.
as a human. I just
Also,
ruin it.
Lynda, having listened to our first episode, test episode myself, I think we're being a little hypocritical right now with the corporate speak because I think we said the word unpack a combined 7 or 9 times on the first episode. So don't we
We
have to
did.
retire unpack also?
No, because I don't hate that one. We're only
Oh, I see
retiring
the
things that
rules.
we
Okay.
don't like.
I see how this works now. Understood.
It's all just a podcast of opinions. I mean, that's really
Thank you
what
for
we're here. We're
clarifying.
celebrating our opinions.
Yes. Yes, and a ruling party, the opinion of one. I'm learning the rules quickly, Linda.
Yes. Again, it's all, I one of my favorite books, my favorite books of all time, this is probably very telling of me, is Cat's Cradle by Kurt Vonnegut.
Hmm,
And my favorite
right.
part is, again, we're talking about a topic that we shouldn't talk about, but he said, it's all make believe anyway. It's all made up anyway. And
Hmm,
so if we take that logic, like it's all just our opinions anyway. And if you don't like them, okay. Like you're welcome to have different opinions too.
totally fair. I have read Vonnegut's Breakfast of Champions, and I strongly recommend it. That is a
It's a good one.
hilarious book.
It's a good one. I really Cat's Cradle. That's my
All right,
that
I'm
I
gonna add it
forced
to the
my kid to
list.
read it. He didn't get it. But
I'm
one
gonna
day he
order
might.
that book on Amazon, and then when it comes, my wife is going to scold me and say, "Why do you keep ordering books on Amazon that you're not reading?" And I'll be like, "Stop it, stop it."
Books are great. Is that our closing? Our closing statement is books are great.
Books are great, and let's just celebrate the small win that we allow ourselves when you order the book on Amazon that you should be reading. Relish that moment. You are so smart. You're using your
Mhm.
time wisely because you're reading instead of on the screen in the moment you order it. If that never actually occurs and you never read it and just watch Netflix at night, whatever. At least you've celebrated your small win of ordering it. Can we agree on
Yes,
that too?
I love that, and I think that's the
Excellent.
best place to close out episode 2.
Sounds good. Thanks, Lynda. Thanks,
Thank
everyone. See
you.
you next time.